Every Shade of Red by Elliot Wake. What is quite possibly my favorite story ever? England, late 14th century. The first time we kissed, our bodies bronzed in the ember light, our skin a mosaic of shadow and fire, Robin cupped my face and set against my lips. I'm not like other boys, Will. It was the first kiss of many. I would remember his words years later, before the last. But I never actually heard his voice. Speech was touch and sight, was without sound after the illness. A pulse of air stirring my hackles, a glimmer of light playing over his mouth. My ears heard nothing, but the rest of my body learned new languages. For me, Robin spoke concisely, carefully, so that I could read his lips. I treasured every word more than gold. Look at this, Will. He stood in the torch-thrown shadows of our forest hideout, surrounded by his stolen hoard. Coins spilled over the edge of a coffer when he lifted it. Robin laughed, his eyes fiery with 100 mirrored suns. I felt his laughter like I did the doubloons clinking and rolling across the moss oak floor. Golden sounds, bright and round, rumbling off into the shadows. "We're rich," a boy said, and another. "We're kings!" "And queens," Alex quipped. They slung their arms around her, hoisted her to the rafters, crowing, "Long live the queens!" Other words I couldn't decipher swirled around me, a cloak of hot breath. My heart filled my whole chest. We had done this. Robin's lost boys and lost girls, lost children society had thrown away. We'd woven together a family of orphans and outcasts and exiles. Not one of us shared blood. Not one of us would balk at spilling our own for a brother or sister. "Fools!" Little John roared, slamming his staff against the planks. Coins leapt like molten droplets, a foot taller than the tallest of us, with his head swathed in brilliant white scarves and a pearl earring gleaming against rich brown skin. John seemed like African royalty. "Kings are weak men who think gold and gems give them power. Shiny bits of broken earth." He picked up a coin, flashing its bright eye back and forth. "This is not power. We took it from them, and it may be taken in turn from us. It is nothing, friends, nothing compared to what we possess. With all the gold in the world, they could not buy what we have. It makes us mightier than kings." "And how, pray tell, are we mightier than kings?" asked Alex. Little John tossed the coin into the hearth fire. "We are free." A pensive silence spread through the room. Robin's eyes spread over us without seeing. In the honeyed light of the hearth, his smooth face shone, hairless and fair. He'd laugh when I would nuzzle him, graze my coarse jaw against his soft throat, when I would hold his face and kiss him hard, telling him everything with my mouth, yet without words. When I would press him down into the sweet straw that made our bed. My beautiful boy, full of laughter and light, but not now. His gaze pierced through me. He was whispering. No one else would hear, but I read his lips. Again and again he repeated, "We are free, we are free, we are free." Smoky green haze drifted through Sherwood Forest, as if fire quickened in the leaves, licked from bough to bough and burned coolly, giving off a pale light. Here, under the canopy, the sun dissolved into fog. Wraith shadows glided through the gloom, prowling. Us, the forest gods. Distantly, a horse snickered. I did not hear it. Alex signed to me from a tree across the path. I crouched on a branch high above the others. My eyes were the sharpest. There, a furlong away, the white murk opened like a ghost's mouth, and from it emerged dark shapes. Carriage, beasts, riders. I signaled the numbers and arms of the men. Alex slithered down the trunk. My role was over. I rubbed my thumb over the virgin yew of my bow, twanged the cord with my fingertips. Robin never forbade me from fighting, but he may as well have. "I need those eyes of yours where they'll do the most good," he'd said. But what I heard was, "where there is the least threat of harm." Robin's pet, the others mocked, good-naturedly. Pup, pony, broodmare. "Say that word again," he'd said to the girl who voiced the last, "and I'll cast you out. You can fend for yourself come winter." So she didn't say it. Not that he could hear. But sometimes she would look at me, Rashida, her skin tawny from the desert sun of her people, her eyes rimmed with kohl, and her lips would make a silent oval. Whore. You can hurt a boy like me without speaking a single word aloud. All you have to do is hold it in your mouth. Road dust rose from the horses' hooves, the riders' black whips licking the air like snakes' tongues. They rode fast, knowing the stories about the forest. It wouldn't matter. First, we took their horses. Nets flew out of the bush, burlap sacks weighted with stones. Each one found a beast's head. Blinded, the animals slowed and swayed, leaving their riders easy game. We disarmed the men with staff strikes and lassos on catchpoles as Little John rushed in to throw hoods over their helms. It was done in seconds. The carriage driver called his team to a halt, staring wide-eyed. On a branch overhanging the path, a mass of leaves and vines uncurled lithely and became a boy who dropped light-footed into the dirt, sauntered left a few paces, then right, then bowed, his deep hood shadowing his face. I could not see his lips move, but my heart knew his words. "Gentlemen," he'd be saying, "welcome to Sherwood Forest. I am Robin, Lord of the Woods, Prince of Thieves. I notice that your horses travel under a heavy burden. Permit my friends to lighten the load. Keep your calm and you will not be harmed." As he spoke, we moved. Alan, once a cutpurse whose fingers had been removed by the sheriff, one by one till all he had left were thumbs, approached the carriage with a smile. Alex's swordswoman put silver blades to the throats of any rider who looked apt to resist robbery. Rashida, formerly a courtier whose weapon was words, slung herself into the driver's seat and wheedled him for information. We knew our roles well. We performed them with aplomb. All but Will Scarlet, whose only task was to simper after Robin. I ground my teeth. That wasn't me anymore. Not the cringing, lily-hearted son who so disgusted my father. Not the boy who tangled his limbs with those of another boy, and rolled through the crackling summer grass, and let my head fill with blue sky and bliss, then cried when a farmhand told my father, and again when my father made me watch every lash the other boy took. 40 lashes, but 45 marks on that boy's back, 5 of which were mine. As I watched him writhe, I could feel his taut muscles moving against my skin, smell the salt and sea musk of his sweat. My father had said, "If it happens again, I will kill him." "Then you may as well kill me too," I'd screamed with my hands, stabbing my finger at my own heart. My father's face did not change. Calmly, he answered, "A widower does not slay his only heir, but if I must, I will remove your manhood and marry you to a nobleman, as befits a woman." That night I crept into the stable. In the last stall was my father's prize stud, painted silver blue with moonlight. I left no letter. Months later, while scrubbing piss and ale from filthy floorboards, I spied a scrap of parchment tacked to a tavern wall. "A handsome reward is offered for the return of a white stallion belonging to the Lord of Scarlock." Perhaps I hadn't given him enough credit. He knew which of us held the higher value in breeding. My name was Scarlet now. No longer a lord, but a mere boy. One who loved another boy. Alan ducked out of the carriage and said something I couldn't parse. Robin glanced up into the trees, seeking me. I dipped a hand into my tunic lacing and fished out the medallion. A bronze fox, tarnished with fingerprints. The symbol of Locksley, Robin's house. One eye was missing, but the other was a ruby, and this cast a stray shaft of light, bursting into a rose of sun. I whisked the metal back and forth, signaling in code. The way is clear. Nervously, a lordling climbed out of the carriage. A hand reached after him, slim and white. His sister, perhaps? Alan bent over that hand and kissed it, grinning. Below me, boys scattered the horses into the wood. We could not keep them.
Horses left tracks, while swords girls tied up the men-at-arms with leather scraps. Tuck, who'd abandoned his noble titles because a friar need not wed nor bed, and he longed for neither, swung a heavy velvet sack, and I imagined the music it made. Fine chimes of silver, dulcet bells of gold. The children faded into the forest, our clothes the color of leaf and bark, blending, becoming one. In moments, all that remained was Robin in his hood, his face unseen. I had waited too long. I was supposed to retreat when the others did, but I never missed this part. Robin snatched the whip from the carriage driver. As he climbed atop the coach, his cape flickered, a patchwork of leaves and flowers and fur. He looked like the forest made flesh, an avatar of living wood. The whip cracked, coiled around a tree branch. He looped it over his forearm and leapt into the green air, and, like magic, vanished. Though I'd seen this trick 100 times, I could barely track him as he moved and swung up into the canopy. If not for one flaxen lock of hair slipping from his hood, I'd have lost him. My golden boy. The riders stirred, loosening their bonds. Time long passed for leaving. I shimmied down a chain of grass ropes, my rabbit-skin boots supple and swift. The men would mask my noise in their attempts to free themselves. I knew how loud I was by nature's response. A startled bird winging away into a rainbow streak, a scuttle of paws kicking up dirt. Sometimes, sight is a more powerful way of hearing than sound. Before I disappeared into the undergrowth with the others, I saw it. A torn parchment. I knelt slowly, my heart thrashing. At Scarlock Manor I had learned to read and write, the privileges of a lord. Most of the others couldn't. Robin himself struggled. He'd ask me to read for him, then curse and ball his fists in frustration. It puzzled me. "Your father is a lord," I'd signed, miming a crown, fingers to forehead like antlers. "Did he not teach you?" "Why would he teach me?" Robin had snapped. Patiently, I'd signed, "Because you are his heir, his only son." Robin had stared at me expressionless. Then, quick as a fox, he embraced me. I could not see his lips to translate, but he said something over and over against my chest. 3 short words, 3 knives rattling between my ribs. My heart still trembled to think of it. Now, in my hands was something else that shook my heart. Mud blotted the ink, obscuring the words. What I could read was enough. "A handsome reward is offered," it began, and at the bottom it ended. "Report any sightings to the Sheriff of Nottingham." The lordling's name was Nicholas. His tale had come through our usual channels. Gossip in pubs, coins pressed into sweaty palms. One afternoon, rumor said, Lord Hamish had returned early from the hunt, his horse maimed, to find his son, Nick, in bed with a serving girl and a stable boy, the 3 tangled together like some unholy chimera. Lord Hamish did not possess the mercy my father did. Nick unlaced his shirt to show us the scars, crimson wheals, angry and boiling in the firelight. So, Robin rescued him, contrived an invitation for Nick to court a noble daughter across the forest. On their passage through our wood, we ambushed. Later, we would bolster the ruse, cut the finger from a cadaver, slip on Nick's signet, courier it to his father. Hamish lost a son. We gained a brother. It set off a friendly contest, the others removing bits of armor and clothing to tell the stories of their own scars. Parents who'd disowned them, whoremongers who'd betrayed them. Robin watched with a solemn face, and when it came his turn, he said simply, "My scars are on the inside," and stalked out of the house. I followed him into the spiced dusk air. Summer waned, days shortening, sunlight deepening into poignant shades of amber and marigold. A final decaying richness before death. I tried not to read portents into it, but thoughts were cagey, feral. In the pocket of my breeches, the fragment of parchment lay folded. It burned against my thigh like a coal. When Robin caught sight of me, he smiled. That sly, rakish smile that had made my belly tighten the night we first met. Years passed, both filching eggs from an innkeeper's hen. I'd sold the white stallion for meat and meat. Robin had stolen the horse to return to me. We raced it out of town as watchmen chased, my chest molding to his slender back, my arms around his waist, both of us laughing. On a hilltop we watched the distant torches as they swam madly like fireflies against the night sky. I set the horse free in the woods, and Robin's eyes twinkled. "Come meet my brothers and sisters," he'd said. And I thought, anything that keeps me near you. Years passed, but my blood still fired at that smile, same as the first time. Robin tilted his head toward the wood. We walked into the trees, hands linked. I felt the air buzz with insect song, and my body hummed in harmony. At the creek, Robin guided me to a tree stump, opened my shirt. His hands were small and elegantly formed. Water ran through them, liquid threads of mirror, like mercury. "You don't have to," I'd said, but he silenced me with a kiss. Sometimes, in a thunderstorm, a lance of white fire would spear down from heaven and split the stone heart of an ancient tree, a crack so deep it seemed to come from the core of the earth. You could feel the skin of the world tense against it. Robin's kiss felt like that. Gently, he tore his lips away and washed my neck, my chest. I shrugged the tunic off. His fingers traced the terrain of my body, each ridge and slope of muscle. They raked through the trail of hair at my belly, and he kissed me again. "Robin," I'd said aloud, and from his smirk I knew I'd moaned his name. "I found something." That somber look returned, as if he already knew. I drew the parchment from my breeches, unfolded it. "It's a bounty. The sheriff is offering a reward." "For who? Who do you think?" Lord Scarlock was the wealthiest of all our fathers, the only one who could interest the sheriff in his personal plight. It must be his bounty, and the quarry must be me. "It's been years," Robin said. "He's let you go." His eyes focused on the water beating on my chest. I could not read his tone. "Perhaps something's happened," I signed. "Perhaps father's fallen ill, realized his holdings will be picked over by his cousins like vultures cleaning a carcass. Maybe he wants his heir back. By force." Robin rolled his shoulders languidly. He pulled at my belt. "Are you bloody listening?" I gripped both of his wrists in one hand, speaking with my mouth. "This is serious." In the blue-green gloaming, his face appeared delicate and fey, almost nymphish. There was a beauty to him that bordered on the unreal, a fineness that made girls heady, drunk on longing. It did the same to me, of course. "You're not the one they're looking for, Will." "How do you know?" "I know." I opened my mouth and again he kissed me, but this time I could not resist. My lips crushed against his, tasting the piney rosemary sprigs he chewed. Every muscle in me fixed to draw him closer. I pulled him down into the dough-soft grass, our legs entwined, our hands clawing at each other. Atop me, he felt lean and strong, dominant. My body was wet clay to him, responding fluidly to every touch, and every touch circled toward the center, the root of the ache. When he finally grasped between my legs, I thought my teeth might shatter. Robin pressed his cheek to mine. Blonde hair spilled around us, a veil of sun. He whispered something. All I sensed was heat, lips skimming my ear. He knew I could not understand, but still he crooned to me as he unlaced my breeches, put his hands where I needed them, made my hackles dance and my skin sing. Language is not only words. We speak with our whole bodies, with gesture and glance and touch. We hold each other 1,000 times with steady hands and searing insides of our mouths, telling them, "You are the boy I love." Now, he told me again as I stared up into the night, the stars switching on, disintegrating the sky into glitter, a dark body slowly consumed with light. Misgiving woke me from half-sleep. I lay alone on the pallet, Robin's bedroll cool to the touch. He'd been gone a while. I tugged my pants on and padded barefoot through the camp. We never stayed in one place long. No sense making the sheriff's job easy. Our village was oilcloth tents and crude log lean-tos. The hideout had once been a prairie. Now the timber rotted, and moss bearded the fieldstone. Robin loved it, the natural reclaiming the unnatural, just like us. At the outskirts of camp, a willowy silhouette stood in the moonlight, idly twirling a staff while he kept watch. As I neared, Tuck planted the staff aside. "Evening, Will. Can't sleep?" "I'm looking for Robin. Haven't seen him." Tuck raised a bushy brow. His eyes were bright and intelligent, but warm, too. "What's troubling you, my son?" It was a joke. Friar Tuck, the boy who did not believe. He'd turned to the order to escape an arranged marriage, threw away his lands and legacy without a mote of faith in his heart. When I'd asked him why, he'd said, "Could you imagine wedding a woman, having children, and being happy? No. For you, happiness is being with a man. For me, happiness is being among friends. Love takes many forms, Will Scarlet. If I must lie to the world to be true to my heart, then I'll lie. I'll cheat, I'll steal, and I'll do it with a smile. Love is the only higher power I answer to, and my love is no less for being chaste." Tuck knew the language of hands and helped me teach it to others. In the order, the brothers lived for days, weeks, months in strict silence, communicating only with signs. Quiet smoothed the riffles from the pond, he said. His mind grew calm and clear. The words he spoke with his friends, with his hands, took on deeper significance. An entire day would pass, and the only word he'd have shared with another soul was please. "Imagine the world like that," he'd said. "Imagine if all we could share was kindness." I touched the paper in my pocket. "I'm in trouble, Tuck. The sheriff's after me." "Are you certain?" I showed him the bounty. "My eyes aren't as sharp as yours," he'd signed, "but I don't see a name." His gaze flicked over my shoulder. I felt a presence, turned. Rashida strode into the moon-washed clearing. Her hair hung loose, a midnight cowl sweeping about her long, leonine face. Flowing white robes trailed her like silk spun from sheer moonlight. Often our expressions settled into the grooves of our strongest traits. In Robin, it was mischief. In me, stubbornness. In Rashida, it was pride. It took a moment for me to notice the torn parchment in her hand. The other half. "The name is right here," she said. "May I see it?" Rashida smiled. A breeze snapped her robe, and I pictured a cat lashing its tail. "What is it worth to you?" "I have nothing that you don't also have," I signed. We kept no coin for ourselves. All of our wealth was shared. "Don't you?" She glanced at the medal on my chest, the bronze fox. Reflexively, I cupped it against my heart. "This was a gift," I began, feeling my throat clench. Rashida clucked her tongue, exaggerating for my benefit. "I have no need of baubles. What I want is your post. Let me climb the tree and be Robin's lookout." She was still smiling. Beneath the glaze of moonlight in her eyes, they were bloodshot. Strange. Tuck shifted his weight. "That's not wise, sister. Just once. That's all I ask." "Done." I signed and extended my palm. "Trade me." With utmost reluctance, I unknotted the leather cord. "I want it back." "I give you my word," she said, and I could see the wryness curling in the sounds of her mouth. When she left, Tuck twirled his staff again, anxious. This isn't like her. Rashida has a good heart. I knew she did. Sometimes we found young girls in the carriages we stopped. Girls with burnished nut-brown skin and sparrow bones, wearing petticoats and girdles and the face paints of high-born ladies, like dolls. Rashida would offer them refuge. Too often they refused, afraid of coarser treatment at the hands of the brigands. Once, we discovered a girl of 11 years, her belly swollen with child, her eyes bewildered and dull. She would not leave the coach. On my watch that night, I spied Rashida leaving camp. I followed her into the woods to a hollowed stump. Lightning split, its edges blackened. She crawled inside, and I listened to the silence in my head till she crawled out again. Her face was wet and streaked with the dark paint like fingers of shadow. I knew there was goodness in her. She despised me for what I symbolized. The light-skinned men of wealth, the lords who enslaved women as playthings. I could not blame her, yet those same men hated me too. Tuck was saying something, but I was fixed on the paper. I tilted it into a moonbeam. There it was, in iron gall ink, a black tinged with rust, as if with blood. The friar leaned over my shoulder. See, he signed, his tension slackening. It's not you after all. But my nerves were not soothed. The bounty listed a description. Hair the color of summer wheat, eyes the color of sun filtering through canopy, a height that would reach my shoulder, a name. It was the name that made me afraid. Lady Marian, it read, of Locksley. Weeks passed before Rashida had her turn playing Hawk's Eye. It felt both like no time and all time. The pace of life quickened as we stocked provisions for winter, mended boots and cloaks, chopped firewood, burned caches of dried meat, and nuts and berries. Not all of us would survive the cold. I wondered who we'd lose this year. It was never who you thought. Alex once coughed blood for months while Rashida sat at her bedside, dabbing her forehead with a damp poultice. Yet, Alex recovered, and in the spring thaw, a boy named Joran tiptoed across a frozen lagoon until it cracked, and he fell in and drowned. Perhaps this year it would be Nick. We bathed together in a creek, and he caught me staring at his naked chest. His scars had healed fully, turned invisible. Still strong and well-fed from his lordling days. He must have healed quicker. He flushed as I watched him dress, and it didn't occur to me until later that he must have presumed lust on my behalf. Absurd. What I felt for Robin burned stronger than anything, even the fever that had taken my hearing. I wish I was like them, I told Tuck as we watched Alex and Rashida sharpen their swords. Their bodies moved in rhythm, one girl beginning a motion that the other completed. Women who are lovers aren't looked at with revulsion. Women are seen as less than men. That's why they're permitted indulgences. They're pretty pets to them. Is that so much better? Then I wish I was like you, unbeholden to carnal desires at all. And you'd be seen as less of a man, too. A man who does not serve God must serve his earthly father and give him grandchildren. Is there no way for men like us to be happy then, Tuck? He shrugged. I'm happy here. This is the most I've ever been myself. Aren't you? I thought of Robin, those 3 words he once voiced into my chest. Of course, I signed, forcing a smile. Like Little John said, we're free. We can be our true selves with each other. No gold or gems could buy anything more precious. No king's crown could tempt us. He gave me an odd look. Perhaps my eyes had betrayed me. Perhaps he had sensed some undertone in the movements of my hands, some quaver of fear, of dread. That night in Robin's arms, I kissed his smooth throat, unmarked by the apple of Eve's deceit. I touched the leather bindings beneath his tunic, traced the dashing lines of his face, chapped by sun and wind, but still finer than any other boy's. "I'm not like other boys, Will," he said, his lips glistening from the touch of mine. I pinned him flat to the straw and said, "It doesn't matter. I love you." We stared at each other, stunned. Then I said it again. "I love you." I laughed. "I love you." He kissed me, smiling against my mouth with disbelieving joy. The riddle had been solved. Those 3 words rumbled the same way in my chest as they had when he'd spoken them. Rain needled through the leaves, a vast, inescapable flaying of the earth. Leaves ripped free and fell, all harvest colors: pomegranate, beet, radish, every shade of red, like heavy succulent drops of blood. Red was the color of passion, and of treachery. Strange to see this green place changed, undressed. I drew my cloak tighter. Midway up a towering spruce, Rashida, playing the part of lookout, clung desperately to a slick bark. I crouched on the florist floor, indistinguishable from a dozen other sodden hoods. An ideal time for this. Robin would never know we switched roles. Beside me, Alex narrowed her eyes. One gloved hand stroked her sword hilt over and over, as if soothing an animal. We told her of the ruse and she'd merely shrugged. Something else nettled her now. "What is it?" I'd signed. Alex frowned. Her fingers curled around the hilt. Bad feeling. I felt it too. The air smelled like metal. The earth underfoot flinched, braced. It was like the moment before lightning, but not the purifying, enlivening charge of Robin's kiss. This was the indrawn breath before calamity. Inside my note were 2 halves of the bounty, sewn together. For the safe return of a maiden to her loving lord husband. I swallowed thickly. Alex flung a hand skyward and I gave a start. I read the conversation between her and her lover. "Riders? Carriage. How many swords? 1 score. How far? Don't know. How far?" Rashida kept shaking her head. Alex glowered at me as if it were my fault. 20 men was greater than expected. Nicholas had sworn this minor lord could call upon no more than a dozen. Still, in the rain and confusion, we would outfox them. I cradled my bow beneath my cloak and prayed it would be over soon. Riders entered the road without warning. They moved at a calm canter, but something seemed off. The animals were tall, roped with muscle. Draft horses. Blankets had been tossed over their sides, but here and there I caught the gleam of enameled armor. No lord's vassal owned a war horse. Who were these men? Before I could alert Alex, the riders came abreast of us. Nets and bolas whirled out of the bushes. A heartbeat later, Little John and his boys waded into the welter of horses and men, and neatly disarmed them. At first I cringed. 4 to 1, poor odds. But the riders milled, confused. One man dropped his sword without being touched. He looked me dead in the eyes as he did it, his gaze hard, and I thought, his gloves were wet. He fumbled. It would make no sense to intentionally throw down his weapon. When the rider's hands were empty, Robin made his grand entrance, a bow unwrapping itself, revealing a boy. Something made me look up at Rashida then. She was not watching us, or the riders. She was staring up the road in the opposite direction, mouth agape. When I turned to trace her gaze, I felt a chill slip inside my cloak, so strong it almost felt like a blade going in. Then, chaos. Horses pounded behind us, a pincer attack. The disarmed raiders drew second swords. The carriage driver, huddled in a rough-spun farmer's cloak, stood and sedately unfastened it, revealing inch by inch the scaled black armor beneath. The wyvern-pommeled longsword, the silver star of office. The sheriff of Nottingham. She stepped lightly into the road. Her men disarmed us in turn, cleaving our catchpoles with brutal bastard swords. In a twinkling, All of the lost boys and lost girls had cold steel at their throats. All but me and Robin. My side gave a twinge, and I stumbled. Had I felt a chill? There was heat now under my shirt. I moved toward Robin. The sheriff's head was bare, her auburn hair braided tight. Her eyes were the color of frost on dead grass. She stalked with serpentine grace, the longsword bobbing over her shoulder. I don't understand, Robin said to her, wonderingly. I thought the Saracen betrayed me. Nick Hamish stepped out from behind us, wiping a blade on his cloak. You thought wrong, milady, he said, and flicked an arc of red into the rain. I convinced the Saracen to swap places with your lookout. Her kind are ever eager to prove they can do more than spread their legs. Those fine powders she paints on her face, I saw how they reddened her eyes. She can't see any better than this boy can hear. You have many weak links in your chain, milady. It was quite easy to snap. Of course. Nick's scars healing so miraculously, Rashida always competing with me, desperate to prove she was more than her past. Nick had struck at our weak points masterfully. How had I, of all of us, been so blind? It felt as if a wild dog had sunk its teeth into my side. I groped at my tunic. Will, Robin said, rushing to me. Our hands found the wound together. Blood bloomed, welling in our palms in luscious wet petals. It was beautiful, I thought. Ominous, but beautiful, like autumn leaves. All of this red, every shade, draining from me. Vermilion, crimson, scarlet, my namesake. When I looked at Robin's face, I saw that he was screaming, sobbing. Eerie that such passion could rack him while my head remained silent. The sheriff bent over me. At some point, my body had folded to the ground. With her this close, I saw lines mapping worry across her face, a wrinkling of regret. Look, Lady Marian, the sheriff said to Robin, and I imagined her voice, smoky and soft, elegantly viperous. Your lover is wounded. I can save him, if you return to your betrothed husband. Robin's tears were like nothing I had ever seen. When he cried over Joran and the others who died, it was calm, almost peaceful, an acceptance of nature's inevitabilities, of all things ending. What more could we ask to live and die free men? This was different. His face was twisted, his teeth bared and his eyes filled with a wild, mad light, in untethered terror. He looked so afraid. My Robin had never looked so afraid. Lady Marian, the sheriff said again, your husband, Lord Scarlock, is waiting. Robin did not look at her. He touched my chest, where the fox head should have been. I don't understand, I said, or tried to, but perhaps my lips moved without sound. Why is she talking about my father? Well, listen to me. I must do what the sheriff says. Why? I mouthed. That's not your name. That's not you. His chest heaved. He scrubbed a hand across his eyes. Someday, please forgive me for this. I know you'll despise me, but I have no choice. I can't let you die. I don't understand, I mouthed again. You do. I know you do. I'm sorry, Will. Faintly, I felt hands lifting me. Robin's face receded, strangely small and elfin, fragile. He lunged for me, but the sheriff held him back with a strong arm. I was too weak to lift mine and sign. I just kept saying his name. Robin, Robin! He held my gaze as the forest closed around us, screaming my name over and over, and I did not shut my eyes, even as darkness crept in at the edges. I knew the air trembled at a higher pitch when he spoke. His throat held no apple, his face was beardless, soft. These things had been used against him, fashioned into a name and a fate that were not his. My birth name was not mine anymore either. It didn't matter. Like Tuck said, if we must lie to the world to be true to our hearts, then we would. A face bent near mine. Something pressed into my chest. the fox said. Rashida gazed down at me and sighed fiercely. You better bloody stay alive, Scarlet. At least until you get our Robin back. Do you hear me? Then her mouth compressed in a pained smile, and she brushed the hair off my forehead. I'll find him, I whispered breathlessly. I promise, Robin. I'll find you. The last thing I saw was the green roof of the forest, dulling into gray and falling down around me. And then, darkness. But in the darkness, all I saw was my beautiful boy. My golden boy. My Robin. No other name fit him, and never would. Sometimes, sight is a more powerful way of hearing than sound.